In today's market update, we're going to be taking a look at the S&P 500 and also gold, and focusing on my favorite cycle tool, the future line of demarcation, or FLD. I've titled this video "The Devil is in the Details" because there are details about the FLD that you need to understand in order to trade it effectively. The FLD itself is a very simple line. It is deceptively simple. It is the median price, in other words, the mid price between the high and low of each bar, displaced to the right on your chart. The amount that it is displaced is half the recent cycle wavelength of the cycle upon which it is based, plus 1 bar. And that is perhaps the first detail that I should mention. Hurst added that extra bar in the work that he published in the 1970s. He did not, to my knowledge, ever explain exactly why he added 1 bar onto it, but that is the formula that we continue to use today. The next detail worth mentioning is that Hurst based the displacement of the FLD on the recent average wavelength. In other words, the wavelength that we have calculated is currently affecting the market that we are trading. There is some debate to be had about this, and I've been involved in that debate for many years. The alternative, of course, is to base the FLD on the wavelength that we have found to be the average wavelength over all time, what we call the nominal wavelength, because it is the wavelength that is defined in our nominal model. If you have been keeping in touch with us at Sentient Trader, then you will know that we released the FLD indicator last week for the MT4 platform. And in a moment, we're going to be taking a look at that, and I'm going to be discussing some of the details, some of the devils in those details, in terms of the work that we have been doing with the FLD. But the interesting thing is that in the tests that we have performed, an FLD is more reliable if it is based on the nominal wavelength when you are working on an intraday chart. In other words, an hourly chart, 15 minutes, 5 minutes, down to 1 minute. In that case, we have found that a fixed wavelength FLD, or an FLD that is displaced by the average wavelength, the nominal wavelength, is more effective than an FLD that is displaced by the recent wavelength. As a matter of interest, because of the work that we have done in developing the new FLD indicator, Sentient Trader now has a new ability. You can plot a fixed wavelength FLD, or an FLD that is based upon the nominal wavelength in Sentient Trader. That version of Sentient Trader is currently in testing and will be released soon. But now let's turn our attention to what is happening in the S&P 500 at the moment and discuss another devil in the details. In last week's market update video that I recorded on President's Day in the US, which is this bar over here, I mentioned the fact that the 40-day cycle trough had very probably formed in the market. Here is our nest of lows for that 40-day cycle trough, and there is a very likely point at which that 40-day cycle trough occurred. I mentioned that, of course, our next interaction with the FLD is expected to be an F category interaction where price crosses down below the 20-day cycle FLD on its way down to the next 20-week cycle trough. As you can see, on Tuesday, price slipped down below the 20-day cycle FLD. So here is another important detail. When price crosses down below the FLD, or I should say when the median price crosses down below the FLD, which of course it did last week on Tuesday, we can generate a target to the downside. That target is calculated by measuring the distance from the high price down to the FLD and projecting the same distance beyond that. I think that you can see on this simple illustration that I am presenting here that the target for that downside projection last week was 49.50. The interesting thing is that, of course, price came down, reached that target, and then turned back up again. So was that our F category interaction? No, in my opinion, it wasn't. Our F category interaction still lies ahead of us. So what was this interaction over here? I mentioned in a recent market update video about news events and how they affect financial markets, that price will often interact with an FLD when there is a news event and there is increased volatility. Of course, there was a big news event on last week, Wednesday. And so, in my opinion, what happened last week is that price, having bounced up from the FLD at the formation of the 40-day cycle trough, gave us what was effectively a fake tap of the FLD. Now, how could we have protected ourselves against what turned out to be a very disappointing interaction between price and the FLD? It's actually very simple. We calculate the target that is generated when price crosses the FLD. When price achieves that target, as it did on the very next day, that move is effectively complete. When you get these very small targets that are generated, such as occurred last week, my best advice is to stay clear of it, because only if we have a good, juicy target that we are reaching towards is it going to be worth trading that interaction with the FLD. We will see how price action plays out over the next couple of weeks. And when price next approaches the FLD, we will still be looking for an F category short trading opportunity for that interaction. Now on this chart, as I always do, I've just been drawing squiggly lines. Of course, all of this information in terms of where the price is crossing the FLD is available in Sentient Trader through its trading functionality, but it is presented in a different way in our new FLD indicator for the trading platforms. So let's take a look at the same instrument. This is again the S&P 500, and here you can see the indicator. Just a few things I would like to point out. First of all, here is the 20-day target that I mentioned just a moment ago when looking at Sentient Trader. As you can see, it was reached and achieved last week on Wednesday. As price crossed back up above the 20-day FLD, of course we generated a new 20-day target, which has also been achieved. Here is the important thing. The next interaction between price and what we call the signal cycle, in this case the 20-day cycle, is, as you can see over here, expected to be an F category interaction. That is because price is next expected to come down into a 20-week cycle trough. What about the sequence of interactions in Sentient Trader? Again, I keep my charts simple when I'm presenting these videos, but here is a new feature that we have just completed testing in Sentient Trader, which automatically identifies the sequence of interactions. As you can see here, we have our D category and then E category interactions for the 40-day cycle trough. An interesting extra detail in Sentient Trader is that it actually rates the current sequence of interactions, which presently for the interactions with the 20-day cycle is 80.6%. That is a subject for a separate video, but that's a high rating for this current sequence of interactions, indicating a good degree of confidence in this sequence of interactions with the FLD. Taking a quick look at gold, just because I spoke about gold in last week's market update. And again, we have some interesting details in terms of the interaction between price and the FLD. As mentioned in last week's market update video, and if you haven't seen it, I would encourage you to go back and take a look at it. I'm not going to repeat what I said in that video, but we have here a nest of lows for the 20-week cycle trough. This bar over here is a very likely candidate for that 20-week cycle trough. Here, of course, price crossed up above the 20-day cycle FLD, which is, of course, an A category interaction. Again, I can actually display those labels on this version of Sentient Trader. There is the A category interaction between price and the 20-day cycle FLD. Here is our rating of the current sequence of interactions in gold. As you can see, it's not nearly as good as we had in the S&P 500 analysis. That's an interesting thing to observe. And I should point out is something that does often happen with gold because of the fact that we have the consideration of whether gold is peak synchronized or trough synchronized. So what is our next interaction between price and the FLD? We are of course expecting a 20-day cycle trough to form round about the 1st of March, and at that point we would expect support at the level of the 20-day cycle FLD. That would be a BC category interaction, And so that is what we will be looking for in gold. Taking a quick look at gold in the new Sentient FLD indicator on MT4, here you can see that this indicator has in fact positioned the 20-week cycle trough under this low point over here. It is a little bit displaced. That's a little complicated, and I'm not going to explain why that is in this video. But you will notice also that this 20-day cycle target and the 40-day cycle target were both achieved just at about the time that that trough was forming. That's a clear confirmation that that trough has very probably formed in this market. You can see that we have a 20-day cycle target still sitting up above us. We also have a 40-day cycle target as a matter of interest. And the next interaction that is expected with the 20-day cycle FLD is the BC category interaction, as you can see, where the FLD is expected to provide support to price. We can step down quickly to shorter time frames and take a look at a closer detail of the price interactions that have been occurring. Here is the 4-hour time frame. There is our 20-week cycle trough, which on the 4-hour chart is only phased up to 80 days. The Sentient FLD indicator focuses on only 5 cycles per time frame. Here, as a matter of interest, is a nest of lows for the 10-day cycle trough, which very possibly formed over here. Stepping down to the next shorter time frame, we have the hourly chart. And here you can see in this chart that the 10-day cycle trough has in fact been found. It occurred on the 23rd of February. Notice these targets that have been reached. The 10-day cycle target was reached very accurately. And stepping down to the 30-minute time frame, we can see again those targets that have been accurately achieved at the top of that move. Here is a 12-hour cycle target at the top of this move. We now have a 12-hour target down below us as price moves down into this trough over here, which is expected to be a trough of the 2-day cycle. If you trade on the MT4 platform, we are offering a 7-day free trial of the new Sentient FLD indicator, so you might find it interesting to go along and take a look at this indicator. The important thing to bear in mind, whether you're working with the Sentient FLD indicator with Sentient Trader, or whether you're simply applying the FLD for yourself on your charts, is that the devil can be in the details. Although the FLD is a very simple line to plot, the secret to using the FLD effectively in your trading, in my opinion, is to pay attention to these details. I do hope you found this market update useful and interesting. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments below this video. If you're on the MT4 platform, take a look at our trial of the Sentient FLD indicator. If you're on another platform, then we are developing the indicator for other trading platforms. So if you are working on a trading platform that you haven't seen us mention, then get in touch and let us know, and we will take a look at implementing the FLD indicator on that platform.